Hello again. Well, back to the book. But first, we have to tell you. The other night, we found that we have new skunk babies coming over to say hello. 3 of them, as a matter of fact. Have a picture. Opened up the window and was hissing at them and everything to make them move on. I don't think they really cared much. So, yeah, that's that. Any other grand adventures? Nope, not much. Life is doing well. How about you? So let's read Goblin Proofing One's Chicken Coop by Reginald Bakeley, forward by Clint Marsh. We are on, let me remove my handy-dandy high-speed bookmark, because I'm all that in a bag of chips, you know. We are on The Groundskeeper Guide to Dwarves. Non-native species, dwarvish history, rustics and cider. Dwarf spotting, stones versus stumps, keep calm and carry off, where help may be found, and the opportunity for initiation. Now, mind you, this book was written before the keep calm and whatever became a popular thing. So kind of nifty, eh? No picture on that one. Leaving off from the hen cottage, the groundskeeper on a degoblinized estate daren't step too many paces into the barnyard and surrounding fields without keeping an eye open for signs of at least one other unwelcome and meddlesome creature. A non-native species which has gained a substantial foothold in Britain's rich soil of the centuries. Any hope of employing the common fey deterrent of iron against this foe will prove fruitless. As iron is its foremost trade, we speak in hushed tones of the squinty-eyed metal worker of legend, the dwarf. Da da da. Ha ha. Due to its sly shape-shifting? I didn't know dwarf shape-shifting. That wasn't in Tolkien. Due to its sly shape-shifting ability, the dwarf is likely to go unnoticed on the modern estate. Seen in its natural form, it resembles one of your sturdier yet stunted crofters glimpsed at the village pub. A dour face speckled with soot from a day's toil at the forge. Gray beard streaked with ale from an evening spent recuperating. That may be accurate. Unlike men, however, these grimy urchins are active primarily at night, spending the daylight hours in underground homes or in the topsoil in the form of stones or tree stumps. It has not always been so. From the time of their ancient forging of legendary wonders such as Thor's hammer, the dwarves were no villains, but rather, in fact, the most helpful servants to the gods and men. Clanging about in their smithies about in their smithies, and they hammered molten metal into enchanted swords for the aristocracy and perfectly wrought horseshoes for the common people. Their subterranean cities were marvels of stonework and construction, carved out of the mountain's roots by honest industry and the dwarves' eldritch, I think. Gosh, suck at pronunciation. Eldritch ability to fashion rock, soil, and iron to their then noble will. The tragic fall of the King Arthur ushered in the twilight of this golden era. It was then that Merlin, the greatest magician of all time, charged the dwarves with ceaseless toil at their anvils, such that they might stock the most magnificent armory ever known, one which would await the king's eventual triumph return. Picture! Isn't it astounding? While it's true of yore are thus... While it's true that the dwarves of yore are thus bound to work to this day, to craft peerless sword, helm, and shield, their descendants, tragically forgotten in Merlin's mutterings, are under no such contract. Purposeless, lusty, and nigh on immortal, the dwarvish population has multiplied with each generation, finally bursting the bounds of its underground halls. Emerging here's to ya, you know. This is not cider. Although good, nice, crisp cider on a warm day, nothing like it. Num, 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 num. So, back to it. Emerging blinking and aimless, the dwarves now wander the countryside, slowly and in an ungainly manner, to be sure, plopping down occasionally in the form of a stone or a stump for naps, which can last for years. In these inanimate, unproductive forms, the dwarves block the good man's plow, mar otherwise unspoilt vistas, and literally stand in the way of the progress towards an era when mankind, not some squat mockery of it, can be said to have the upper hand. Yeah, we've proven to be good at that, haven't we? Worse than the sleeping dwarf is the roused one, who thinks nothing of carelessly using his magic to warp the foundations in nearby stone cottages, or to strew sharp swords and cart endangering helms, albeit of unsurpassed craftsmanship, about the farmer's field. Dwarf spotting. Picture! That's how you dwarf spot. Da, da, da. It is therefore important for the groundskeeper to maintain a watchful eye on the arrangement of stones and tree stumps on the estate. This can be aided by historical maps of the property which indicate such details. Yet this is no match for qualified, able-bodied help. Judge not the itinerant, goggle-eyed rustic who, taking a respite from his labors, is to be found gazing for hours at the odd-standing stone or misshapen oak stump. In fact, befriend him. These countryside wanderers may seem as directionless and undesirable as the dwarves themselves, but are in sooth guardians of the glebe, who can provide invaluable service to the groundskeeper. An afternoon's ration of cider is a small price to pay for one of these rural sages in exchange for the consultation regarding the finer points of their observation technique. Any unfamiliar stone, alone or in formation, which you or your pastoral mentor lay suspicion upon may be a dwarf incognito. Ooh. A test against this sort of trickery involves dislodging the stone to check the underside for any unmetamorphosized bits of the fairy. I think I found some of those in the woods sometimes. This is not an inconsiderable task, as dwarf stones can weigh in at well over the heft of a full-grown man. Brace yourself with a few mouthfuls of the cider, and remember to crouch low when lifting the stone, you and the rustic working as one man. With the stone safely resting on its side, commence your investigation. The most obvious clue that your stone may in fact be a dwarf will be the presence of one or two stout fingers emerging from its base, caked in soil as if after a morning's dig in the veg patch. By not attaining a complete transformation, the dwarf maintains contact with the earth, the primary source of all its dark magic and unearthly vitality. Never fall victim to the dwarves' not uncommon ruse of changing into a woodland creature and then into a stone. If the investigator, be he proper groundskeeper or the simple countryside tinker, catches sight of a hare's ear or a toad's back leg dangling from the base of an upturned stone, it is no less a sign of the malicious fey activity than would be a few hirsute knuckles emerging from the same. Keep calm and carry off. It is only natural that one may react with alarm or disgust when confronted the first time with such a monstrosity as a befringed stone, but placidity of mind and action must be maintained at all costs. Do not touch the yet dwarvish bits of the stone. To do so will awaken the creature and stir up its innate tendency towards bloodthirsty revenge. A dislodged dwarf is a disturbed dwarf, and a damaged dwarf is a dwarf dishonored. And if there is evidence of a fairy with a looser grasp on the concepts of turn the page, either forgive or forget, my extensive research and experience have not yet brought it to light. The gravest crime against dwarf stones have involved communities of well-meaning but foolish people who, employing alternatively Bonfires and dousings of cold water have caused the stones to crack into small pieces, enough for a reassignment into the construction of an unwittingly macabre, I can't talk tonight, village buildings and bridges. It is against my reserved nature to go into detail about the vengeful actions carried out against these hopeless families by the relations of the deposed dwarves. Some such towns yet await the arrival of these enraged descendants. Woe unto them, for the doom they have awakened. Doom, doom. Nah. Therefore, one endeavors in this situation not to harm, but merely to displace the dwarf. A dwarf stone held aloft for too long will wither its inhabitant. So a new resting place must be found. If the relocation process will be a swift one, the only precaution is to avoid human contact with the appendages. For displacement procedures taking more than a day or two, the groundskeeper is advised to pack a good amount of damp soil carefully around the entirety of the protruding parts. The dwarf won't have much of an idea that it has been found out unless it discovers that its connection to the earth has vanished. A perception which can take a few days to formulate, the slug's pace of a dwarf's intellect slowed even more by its lithic form. This time is best spent by the resolute groundskeeper and his mumbling companion in depositing the stone far from the farm. For once the dwarf awakens, it will undoubtedly be in a foul state of mind, an attempt to injure its captor through bites, kicks, and practiced blows of any handy tools of its vigorous trade. Even as such an attack is defended against before the dwarf wobbles off, the transgressor's identity is bound to be recorded in the dwarf's black book of enemies once he reaches home, an entry wherein spells disaster for the groundskeeper family or for generations to come. The dwarf stone must be set down outside the borders of the groundskeeper estate, across the hedgerow separating his field from the neighbors. But forethought is rewarded when contemplating this tactic. Does the groundskeeper wish to avoid the anonymity not only of the dwarf but also of that of his fellow man? If the answer is affirmative, other solutions must be considered. That means don't drop it on your neighbor's yard. Oh, jeez. Dropping the unwitting dwarf stone down a mine shaft or into the center of a lake, tipplers should be careful not to tip the rowboat, are two of the best remedies, for neither environment will cause the dwarf undue harm. It will feel quite at home in the shaft and will not drown underwater. Moreover, any subterranean or submerged relocation has the added benefit of securing anonymity for the groundskeeper. Stones have no eyes, maintaining his safety against the dwarf's revenge. More sinisterly clever dwarves mound themselves to the shape of gnarled tree stumps in an effort to more thoroughly embed themselves in the landscape. The groundskeeper must exercise additional caution when investigating a stump he suspects to be a transformed dwarf, as the folds of the bark may conceal one eyelid, which may open to allow the dwarf to see him, or a spiteful mouth, which can shout an alarm to the dwarf's loyal brethren. What's more, the roots travel far beneath the surface of the ground and are too entwined for safe extraction. When such an enchanted tree stump is found, I'm afraid there's very little the average groundskeeper can do about it on his own. No, dwarf stumps must be dealt with using manners and ways known to scant few, but persons with a lifetime of training and experience stuck safely behind their natural fiber belt. Thankfully, there's a class of man whose numbers have kept pace with those of the dwarves, growing especially prevalent over the last 100 years or so. Each wise worker who walks this path possesses knowledge of the uses of holly, juniper, and mugwort, along with the pedigree traceable, often quite plainly, in his grove's oral history, directly back to that utmost and aforementioned enchanter Merlin. You know of whom I speak. Enter the Druid. Da, 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 bom, 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 ba-da, ba-da. To be found at Stonehenge at the solstices, at incense-wafted bookstores and hobby shops the rest of the year. The Druid is, to a tree. You're a man for extracting a dwarf stump from your property. Seek him out, offer him mead. Compliment his robes and sickle. Tell him, I sent you. As the maintainers of a magical tradition, the Druids employ arcane ways to protect field and farmstead from the depredations of dwarves. Their methods are those of what is known as sympathetic magic. By sympathetic, one should not infer that the outcome of such sorceries is of a harmonious nature to the dwarf. Nothing could be further from the truth. What is sympathetic about the magic is that the actions taken by the Druid on a small scale are reflected in the large scheme of things. A puppet may be sewn to portray the already mannequin-like dwarf, for example. Once ensorcelled by the Druid, this doll may be manipulated, even reasoned with to an extent, leading in most cases to the dwarves' ungrumbling and voluntary wandering off. Yeah, it's gonna leave. You know what I meant. Ah. That's not mean. Although I know excellent mean mate. Oh my God, she's such a good bird north of Denver. Nom, nom, nom. This groundskeeper needs to bear in mind that while it is fine for him to deserve the druid's spellcasting to the extent this priest of the earth allows, for goodness sake, he should not attempt these magical workings himself without proper accreditation. The druid will likely be happy to lead you to a nearby bit of parkland for the initiation into these mysteries. Yeah. But honestly, who's got the time for all that? Nah, not me. But after all, there is much work to be done around the estate now that all the dwarves are haunting the neighbors' fields. Oops. Or resting peacefully in the depths of the nearby coal mine or pond. That's it. Look at that. We got, that much. Look at it. We're at least a third done with the book. Pretty cool, eh? Talk to you later. Bye.